Calling all safety pros, risk leaders, and training champions. If your caffeine game doesn't match your mission, you're sipping from the wrong cup. At Safe Start Strategies, we've brewed up something bold, professionally themed mugs built for those who lead with purpose. Whether you're writing incident reports or running tabletop exercises, your mug should speak your language. Emergency Ops Fuels for responders on the move. Train Safe, Lead Loud for trainers making a difference. Risk Analysis Mode on for those crunching numbers and making it safer for the rest. These aren't conference freebies, they're confidence on your desk. Great for certification gifts, team recognition, or just owning your safety swagger. Find your mission mug now at TikTok Shop. Just search Safe Start Strategies, number 4, letter U. Lead the change, lift the mug, let the message show. Voices of Safety, where we highlight real voices, real risks, with real impact, and where every story has something to teach us. In this episode, we are honored to welcome a leader whose work sits at the intersection of crisis response, public health, and educational innovation. Dr. Rodric Bowman. Known nationally as an emergency response and public health expert, Dr. Bowman brings clarity, conviction, and deep field expertise to the most urgent challenges of our time. His impact stretches from the front lines of disaster readiness to the halls of higher education, where he has shaped policy, mentored future leaders, and transformed organizational culture. As a distinguished academic professor and thought leader, Dr. Bowman doesn't just teach. He provokes, inspires, and equips. His insights, challenges, and conventional paradigms elevate conversations around leadership, equity, and resilience. And as a higher education executive leadership professional, he's guided institutions through complexity with unwavering purpose, pushing beyond tradition to reimagine what responsiveness, safety, and community care truly look like. Welcome, everyone, to Voices of Safety. I'm your host, Dr. Sharita Green, and here today we have Dr. Rodric Bowman. He is an emergency response and public health expert. He's a distinguished academic professor and thought leader. He is a higher education executive leadership professional. So just want to kind of kick things off by welcoming him and thanking him for his time today. And hopefully he'll be able to share with us some insights about the field, his journey. Just kind of touching on that, I'd first like to know what inspired you to pursue this career? Like what led you into this field?
Well, firstly, thank you, Dr. Green, for inviting me on tonight. And certainly a pleasure to be here with you to share my insights and my experiences. What led me really to pursue a career in safety, crisis risk management really stems from a deep desire to protect people and create safer environments. I think early on in my career, I've witnessed the consequences of poor planning, lack of preparedness, and really inadequate safety measures that really fueled my commitment to make things better. So I kind of really fell into this space. My early career was really focused on public health, right? So I worked as a field rep in Baltimore City, Maryland for a little bit, out in the community, doing outreach, trying to, improve health outcomes, within the city of Baltimore. I've also spent some time in other health departments throughout the country. And that experience actually led me to public health preparedness. And once I kind of, was introduced to public health preparedness, I fell in love with the public safety landscape, right? Everything that dealt with, protecting, our constituents, making things better, continuous improvement. Really, so that background and those experiences really led me here.
You mentioned something kind of along the lines of a pivotal moment that kind of led you there. What exactly was that moment where you were like, okay, this is where I need to be?
Well, I mean, in terms of like my leadership, and understanding leadership, it was a moment in time where, there was a situation where I was responsible for performing a critical incident investigation. And throughout that investigation, I found a ton of deficiencies, right? A ton of systemic gaps in safety issues. And, and out of them, unfortunately, was the result of, poor leadership. So it kind of inspired me to focus in leadership within this space and really to be able to be that decision maker, to be able to, work with my team, work with various stakeholders, really to inspire and empower change, right? So, I would say that particular moment in time, a number of years back, really kind of, sparked my desire to want to move up into a more leadership role within that organization.
Well, let me ask you this. What personal values or principles kind of guide your decision making or kind of guide your career in this field when you sort of think about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really comes down to three key principles for me. The first would be integrity,
Hmm.
acting in an ethical manner, having, following ethical standards and ensuring transparency in all safety initiatives and all work with partners. And the last part is really accountability, being accountable for myself, being able to take criticism, to be able to understand my shortfalls, understand my strengths and my weaknesses,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
then, being able to understand the strengths and weaknesses of others and being able to, build on those strengths and help improve some of those weaknesses that my team may have. And finally, it's really about continuous improvement. And I think I mentioned that early on. It's you always have to be moving forward. There's 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 really a standard that you set, and within that standard, you want to continuously improve and make your situation better, right? You want
Hmm.
to develop your safety programs. You want to enhance your planning and ensure that, you've identified all the hazards in your plan that could potentially happen and you have a strategy, right? So that continuous improvement, I'm a big fan of, when it comes to like emergency management, the after action report. I think that's one of the most important things, that leaders should, help to facilitate an accurate, realistic, and honest after action report, right? Identifying those gaps that you may have found or may have saw within, the real life scenario or the exercise, and really assigning those improvements to key people, right? And holding them accountable for ensuring that those measures are met.
That I like what you were saying about the transparency, continuous improvement, and accountability, because it seems like all of those values kind of work hand in hand. Any good emergency preparedness program, I would assume you do have to utilize continuous improvement. You have to kind of go back, look at where you are, where you're going, and kind of think about where your gaps and opportunities are. And then I would assume that when you are presenting your needs to leadership for money, requests, and resources and things of that nature, you have to operate with some level of accountability and transparency. Do you ever find that you're challenged in those areas? Do you ever feel as though you've had good years, there haven't really been any issues, and people start to fall into like a lull, or do they ever kind of get comfortable? I guess what I'm asking, do you ever have issues trying to sell them on continuous improvement, or do you think that thinking is there?
Certainly throughout my career, I've seen complacency. Things are things are going smoothly. There's been no major issues or major disasters, and everyone gets kind of comfortable, right? But those are the
Hmm.
times when you really should be looking at the what if scenarios, right? And looking at ways that you can, improve upon what you're already doing well, because there's always room for improvement. And I think in this space, there's no 100% measure. The goalpost continues to move. Especially with the types of disasters, the types of threats, um, you know, innovations in technology and things like that open up other types of threats, cyber threats, and now with the development of AI and the Internet of Things, right? There's so much to kind of to worry about,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I think for me, and one of the things that I really have done with teams in the past is, something called red teaming, right? Where you look at the worst case scenario and you look at,
Hmm.
what strategies, what measures, what things, resources, personnel, equipment, whatever needs to be in place to address, that worst case scenario. And
Hmm.
all that planning is kind of like reverse engineered from what could happen in the worst case scenario.
How do you keep that energy up with your team? Like, what type of things do you kind of charge them with as it relates to their own professional growth or continuous improvement? What are some of the things that, you kind of encourage or support?
But the first thing I encourage and support is the concept of team, what it means to be a member of a team, and how your team members really depend on you to step up when you need to step up, and how you should depend on your teammates to,
Hmm.
step up and lean in when that time comes. I think for me and my leadership style is one of empowering my team, not just delegating tasks, but delegating authority and the ability to make decisions, without major oversight. And I think if you empower your team, you build trust, and you build trust, which is critical in any team environment, right? To have that trust, to know that you could depend on someone, know that they know that they can depend on you. You build a culture of collaboration. You build a culture of, really team, and,
Hmm.
and I take team very seriously. And, just from my background, being a college athlete, being a coach, sports and things like that, there's nothing bigger than the team. No one individual is bigger than the team. And I think folks need to understand that.
It's interesting that you mentioned culture of collaboration. I'm aware of culture of caring, but when you go into environments and you believe in promoting or developing a culture of caring, have you ever found yourself in situations where that is not the culture of the organization or that's not the culture of the existing team? And if so, how do you transform that team so that everyone is on the same kind of road or mindset of thinking?
Well, the first is, trying to develop buy-in, right? Buy-in amongst the
Hmm.
team. In order to do that, you have to really kind of find a common ground, whatever it may be, to start chipping away and building the trust amongst the team. Culture shift, and sometimes it takes new perspectives to come in. And I found it in my experience, taking over, new teams, those team members in the past may have felt unheard, their opinions or their insight was kind of pushed to the side. And I listen, right? I think it's
Hmm.
important to listen to your team. And I think it's important to hear, especially if you're new coming into a situation, right? There's institutional knowledge within teams, that you can learn from it as a leader, but it all starts for me with building trust, and then getting everyone to buy into your mission, right? And actually engage, your team in developing what that new mission is going to look like. I think people are more would act, in a different way if they were involved in the process, right? I
I
think they would.
agree.
So, kind of to make decisions in the vacuum, or just make decisions autonomously without, your team and your stakeholders and the folks that, you're working with and or serving. I think you're doing yourself a disservice by not including those folks and getting their insights and getting their perspectives and having them, be a part of the decision making, be a part of that, developing that mission and setting those goals and priorities for the team.
Okay, okay. Well, let me ask you this. When you think about your field and you think about all the changes, how it's changed since you first, came into the field, what advice would you have for someone who is, maybe in college and they're saying, I want to be like Dr. Bowman, I want to take my career to the level or the heights that you've gone. What advice would you give them? What would you do differently? Having the knowledge that you have now, and also considering where you project this field will go and grow. What do you think are some of the gaps or opportunities?
Think, if I was looking at myself 30 years ago, or if I was
Yes.
looking at someone, new to the field, a young person, pursuing this as a career path, the first thing I would tell them is to be useful, right? Because you're learning. You're going to make mistakes. Coming out of college, you're not gonna know everything. A lot of things, a lot of experience comes into play, throughout your years. You have to gain some of that experience. You have to gain some of that knowledge. But I think early on, if you can make yourself useful, no matter what the task, what's being asked, you show your worth, right? You perform, you do tasks that might not that may not be exactly what you want to be doing at that time, right? But it's really about paying your dues and showing that you're useful and that, that shows that you're needed. If you're a useful person is a needed person, and then, right. And a resourceful person is a needed person. So I would say be useful. And what was the second part of that question?
The second part, I guess moving into technical expertise, what technical expertise would you recommend for someone, either as far as majors or certifications? How would you develop their path technically so that they can be competent and capable and competitive?
I think again, if I was looking back, in my career
Mhm.
and kind of some of my training, I would have probably spent more time understanding data
Mm.
and really data analytics and being able to use data to inform decisions. And I think now with, advances in technology, the use of AI, these are opportunities now to take data and make them very useful, right? Make that data very useful. So having an understanding of, especially in the risk landscape, right? Because nothing can be improved if it's not measured, right? So understanding metrics, understanding the data behind those metrics, and understanding how to visualize that data and make it actionable, right? Take that data and make it actionable in terms of, again, that continuous improvement in your programs, reducing instances of, trips and falls if you're looking from a
Mhm,
from a
mhm,
safety from a kind of organizational safety perspective,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
Reducing those claims that you may have, right? And from more public safety, or say, I work in the campus higher education space, right? So campus safety, reducing instances of crime on the campus, or intrusions from outside of campus onto campus, right? Measuring that and looking at that data and applying that data to actual steps that you can do to help reduce, mitigate, ultimately, in the ideal world, eliminate, those potential threats.
So basically, following the data will provide all the answers.
I wouldn't say all the answers, but I think certainly data is a useful tool that I think, as my career progressed, I've become more familiar with manipulating data, understanding, the use and the function of data. I think if I would have had that knowledge earlier on, it would have certainly helped my career along a little bit more smoothly, I think.
Okay, okay, okay. What are some of the trends specifically that you're seeing in higher ed? I worked in higher ed and in safety and compliance. It's been a while, almost 10 years ago. But I'm just wondering currently, what are some of the emergency preparedness, safety, and risk management trends that you're seeing that you kind of feel should be, I guess, a focal point or a focus?
Well, I mean, I think probably the other than physical security type of, issues, right? Being able to control your perimeter, control the insides of your gates, access control. I really do think, like artificial intelligence and the cyber piece is continues to be, something that we need to keep an eye on, right? I think with the growing use of, some of the machine learning tools and, AI tools and things like that, it does very useful, but does open up opportunities for nefarious things, right? So I think kind of having your finger on the pulse of what's going on with that type of technology, and being able to use it and leverage it for your benefit, but also to be aware that there are some actors that can kind of tap into some of these things and kind of cause havoc, right? So I think the technology piece, especially around cybersecurity, continues to be something that we need to keep an eye out for.
Do you think overall as a profession, we're being aggressive enough, or yeah, I'd say aggressive enough when we look at AI? Because I feel like in safety, emergency preparedness and response, there is a multi-generational merge. And I think, the baby boomer generation is looking from one vantage point. Generation Xers are coming in from another vantage point. Yeah, the millennials, and then I think with Generation Z, they're coming in with different strengths, different focuses, different, I almost want to say learning fears. I don't necessarily think the baby boomer generation is as aware or maybe even as interested when they think about AI and recognizing the potential, the risks, and things of that nature. Do you
Well,
think that we are being, as a profession, as aggressive about it as maybe other professions, or is it realistic?
well, I mean, it's coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's here, and it's not going to stop, right? It's a train that's coming through hard, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to be more receptive to learning more about it. Certainly, some of the folks from older generations may not be as as
Yes.
but from what I've seen, folks are open to it, open to
Yes.
understanding it, and really do see, what benefits lie by the use of this type of technology, right? Whether it's, in predictive modeling, the use of AI to really tap into like your CCTVs and pinpoint areas around a campus that might be more vulnerable than others or might be frequented more than others, and being able to move command posts or move security tours to those areas that are more highly trafficked, right? That's certainly a use case for AI. I think also, again, I mentioned predictive modeling, right? Taking that data and being able to feed that data into AI and pull out themes and to better understand kind of things that could potentially occur, and then building strategies around that. I mean, so it's here. It's not going to slow down. It's not going to stop. I think we will all be best served by embracing this technology and understanding. There are, with anything, especially technology, there are threats. There are things to worry about, right? But you need to be, again, like you said, aggressive in
Mhm.
addressing some of those potential threats and utilizing these tools for the benefit of your organization.
Never thought we would get to a place where within a safety department or an emergency response department, if it's big enough, how you could actually have a position that's analytically focused, where they're creating those models, creating those tools. I mean, I see it, and it's definitely it's gonna get, I guess, more needed, as time progresses, because the rate in which AI can synthesize data is amazing.
Yeah, and we've seen it early on in, like, disaster management, right? Especially like
Uh-huh.
looking at, flood inundation, right? Floodplains and repetitive disasters, and taking historical data and being able to predict where flooding will occur, and or where, the highest impact, like from those particular type of situations are. It's just more developed now, right? The use of the data and the AI tools for that predictive analysis. And it's going to continue to grow.
Well, I guess kind of on that note, what innovations do you kind of forecast or predict as it relates to, that you see influencing your field over time? As it relates to risk, what
Yeah.
area of risk do you see the greatest innovation?
So again, we talk about AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning. They really are set to revolutionize, risk and safety management. Again, analyzing vast amounts of data to predict those, potential hazards, identifying patterns, and actually it could help you make recommendations for preventative measures, right? So in the future, I believe that these technologies will enhance our ability to
Uh-huh.
anticipate risks, create a safer work environment, for the people that we serve, our community, our employees, our stakeholders, our partners, and really provide us with more data driven insights,
Uh-huh.
accurate data driven insights to help us do our job, right?
Okay.
I
Okay.
think that's the biggest benefit that we'll see.
Okay, okay. Well, next, this is kind of like my final question for you, but I just kind of wonder, when you think about all you've experienced, when you think about all you've seen, when you
Mhm.
think about where you sit in your career, do you have any final thoughts, words of encouragement, or anything that you'd like to share that would like to get out?
So yeah, I mean, I think number one, I answered part of that question early on about being useful, right? Starting your career, being useful, and just continuing throughout your career to finding a way to be the most useful to your team, the most useful to your organization. I think I would encourage folks to embrace safety as a shared responsibility. I would empower our teams to voice concerns, to contribute to safety initiatives, to be involved in safety initiatives. Our teams and our employees and the folks who serve, they play a vital role in creating safer places, safer spaces, right? So having, their feedback, their insights, their buy-in to help make environments and areas, spaces safer. I think that's key. Stay curious, keep learning, right? There's so much, I have 30 years of experience, right? But my knowledge in the grand scheme of things could fit in a bottle cap, right? If you really think about it, in the whole scheme of things, so just be curious, want to learn, learn from others. There's, just because you have so many years of experience or you might be gray in the beard doesn't mean that, someone with less experience might not have some solid perspectives, right? Some solid insights. So learn from everyone. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. And, stay on top of and embrace technological innovations, right? And try to, leverage those technologies for the benefit of your organization. And I think everything would go pretty well if you kind of follow some of those steps.
Okay. Well, again, Dr. Bowman, I want to thank you for taking the time to have this chat with me and share your thoughts, your experiences, and I just appreciate all of this that you are, done for us this evening.
It's my pleasure. Again, thank you. And I can't wait to work with you in the future, and
Yes.
certainly we'll stay connected, and we'll go from there.
All right. Thank you. We have now entered the part of our program where I share with you the challenge of the week. This week, I was inspired by our interview to share 2 challenges. The first challenge being draft a collaboration compact or contract. It's 5 commitments that you and your team agree to uphold to support a collaborative environment. An example would be to assume positive intent, share credit, listen to understand, post it visibly, and revisit it quarterly. The second mission or challenge, we're going to call it the Ask to Serve experiment. Over the next week, ask three different people in your organization, what's something I could do this month that would be genuinely useful to you? Do not redirect, justify, or promise. Just listen. You want to capture the responses and look for patterns, surprises, or needs that haven't been voiced yet. At Voices of Safety, we're committed to making this podcast a meaningful, practical, and empowering resource for professionals like you. But here's the truth. We can't do it without your voice. We want to know, what topics matter to you most? What struggles, questions, or stories do you want to hear explored? Whether it's compensation, DEI, leadership challenges, or the emotional toll of safety work, your feedback helps us shape episodes that truly resonate. Visit Voices of Safety on Safe Start Strategies website, which is www.safestartstrategies.com, and share your thoughts. You can submit ideas, concerns, or even nominate a guest whose story deserves to be heard. Your insight fuels this community. Let's build something powerful together. Thank you for listening, sharing, and showing up. Please tune in for next week's episode, where experience meets expertise and vigilance becomes a way of life. Whether you're out in the field or shaping policy behind the scenes, your commitment to protection, preparedness, and prevention matters. Until next time, stay alert, lead loud, and let your voice be the safest thing on site. Calling all safety pros, risk leaders, and training champions. If your caffeine game doesn't match your mission, you're sipping from the wrong cup. At Safe Start Strategies, we've brewed up something bold, professionally themed mugs built for those who lead with purpose. Whether you're writing incident reports or running tabletop exercises, your mug should speak your language. Emergency Ops Fuels for responders on the move. Train safe, lead loud for trainers making a difference. Risk Analysis Mode on for those crunching numbers and making it safer for the rest. These aren't conference freebies. They're confidence on your desk. Great for certification gifts, team recognition, or just owning your safety swagger. Find your mission mug now at TikTok Shop. Just search Safe Start Strategies #4, letter U. Lead the change, lift the mug, let the message show.